What's up guys, this video is brought to you by LastPass. LastPass is a service that securely manages all your passwords so you never get stuck at the login screen again. We've all been there, scratching our heads, trying to remember that 10-character alphanumeric code until throwing our hands up in the air before resetting the damn thing for the third or fourth time. Oh, my favorite part is when the verification email takes forever to arrive. So suspenseful. LastPass keeps track of everything so you don't have to write, remember, or reset your passwords. All your data is securely protected at every step, and not having to remember a complex string of characters means you can make them as complex as you want and unique to each account. So you know that eclipse that everyone won't shut the hell up about? Well, those come around about as often as I log into Facebook, so whenever I do, I get hit with 1,000 security questions that feels like some twisted game show about how well I know myself. What's your favorite band, Kyle? You know, from like 12 years ago when we asked you the first time? Eventually, I just started putting not Nickelback for all my security answers. The point is, LastPass saves you all the time and headache that comes with logging in. Put your passwords on autopilot once and for all with LastPass. Click the link in the description below to get LastPass for free. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are taking a look at this guy. This is Zotac's GTX 1080 Ti Mini. You wouldn't really know by looking at the box because Zotac sort of cheaped out. They're using the same packaging as their regular GTX 1080 Ti's apparently, because there's no Mini. I don't see a Mini here. That's why when I got this box I was really confused. I was like, wait, but this is in fact a smaller than average card. If you actually stack it up next to a GTX 1080 Ti Founders Edition, then you can see it is quite a bit, definitely a few inches shorter there, at 8.3 inches long. For all of you who use the smarter measuring system, that's 211 millimeters. While it's much smaller, or shorter I should say, than a Founders Edition card, it is quite a bit lengthier than something like the GTX 1070 Mini from Gigabyte. You can see here it's actually about 1.5 inches longer, which puts it in sort of a stopgap between certain mini cards and a full-length graphics card, which isn't too bad. I mean, all things considered, this is a GTX 1080 Ti. This is one of the most powerful graphics cards on the market today. So the fact that they're able to get it down to even this size is pretty impressive. But if you were looking for something ultra compact, then maybe, you know, you might have to resort to something like this, the GTX 1070, which again is still a very high-end card, but pales in comparison in terms of performance with the GTX 1080 Ti here. So let's talk a little bit more about the card before we actually swap it out for the 1070 here and run some benchmarks. We're going to be actually running it inside of my Go Anywhere Do Anything PC, which takes place inside of the Node 202 from Fractal Design. It's a wonderful mini ITX case. I just figured someone who's buying this card is probably most likely going to be putting it in a system somewhat similar to this in terms of the form factor, the fact that it's mini ITX, maybe some limited airflow. So I feel like we're going to be testing it today in a system that's more or less representative of what the average user who's interested in a card like this would be putting it in themselves. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's talk about the card. First off, the Shroud. The Shroud looks pretty nice. It's color neutral. It's kind of got this gunmetal gray, and for being fully plastic, it's actually pretty sturdy. I think the fact that it's shorter as opposed to longer helps with that. You get some Zotac branding on the front, which does light up in white. There's also some white LED accents, just these little edges right here light up in white. Very tasteful, not too overdone. And the fact that there's no RGB on this card, some of you are going to really like, others are going to be like, no, I wanted RGB. But there's actually a practical reason why they've omitted RGB on this card. It's because without the RGB controller, they're actually able to free up some space on the PCB, or rather, make it shorter. So, you know, they're like, you know what, let's just forget about RGB, whatever, we'll reduce the size of the card even further. Also, the copper heat pipes, we've got 5 6mm copper heat pipes that have also been bent in such a way to reduce the cooler size overall. Taking a look at the fans here for a minute, you might have noticed that they are actually rocking different blade designs and sizes for that matter. So the one on the left is 90mm. It's got these slightly more angular or sharper, maybe a little bit thinner blades on them. This is optimized for airflow, and then this is a 100mm fan that's got slightly wider blades optimized for static pressure, just intended to keep the airflow over the main components a little bit longer. So apparently Zotac has figured that this combination of fans somehow optimizes the cooling for all the main components, including the GPU, memory, and VRM. Of course, we're going to put this to the test inside of our little system here. So that's pretty cool. The fans look, again, very high quality and all that stuff. On the front here, oh, I should mention that you can disable the LEDs, if not in the software, then by simply unplugging the appropriate cable. We've also got two 8-pin plugs to power this card. which may or may not be a great thing depending on the situation. So if you're trying to put this, for example, one of the reasons why I really like this mini 1070 here is because it only has one power plug, and it just makes it a little bit more convenient and easy to sort of route that instead of having two plugs, especially when you're in a cramped case like the Node 202. So that's something to be aware of. A mini card that still has two full-blown power plugs. That's something to consider for your next build if you're going the mini ITX route. That being said, the other thing, just from an aesthetic standpoint, while we're making little critiques here, even though Zotac has done a bang-up job of making this card pretty much color neutral from head to toe, up to the fans, the cooler itself, the shroud, and even that really nice backplate. There's no more like yellow just smearing all over the graphics card, so that's really nice. But I will say that it would have been cool to have some nickel-plated copper heat pipes instead of just the raw copper there. Just saying, it's not a huge deal, but even if it was just that one, even just this one and maybe the ends of the other ones sticking out, and I don't even care about this, no one's gonna see that. That would just make it a little bit more color neutral than it already is, but not a big thing. We've also got Sli Fingers. You could actually pair two of these guys in two-way Sli and just have a beast of a system taking up not too much space at all. This would go really nice in like a micro ATX high-end gaming machine or something like that. Ooh, I'm getting all these ideas. Stop yourself, Kyle. Stop yourself now. Video outs. We should probably look at the video out. So dual link DVI. This is standard reference. We got 3 DisplayPort 1.4s and a single HDMI 2.0B. Now the last thing before we get this installed, I just want to quickly throw up all the basic specs here on the screen so you guys can take a look at it. Go ahead, absorb it. All right, take mental notes. All right, looking pretty good all around. We're still getting 11 gigs frame buffer. So this is just so much spec inside of such a little card. It's pretty exciting. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and install this sucker and run some tests. All right, the graphics card is installed inside of our Node 202 system. We've got GTA 5 fired up. This is running at 2560 by 1440 in windowed mode. We've got Franklin chilling on the garbage truck, just rolling around the streets of Los Santos. And we've got some interesting observations here with our GPU. First of which, here's a quick look at some of the Afterburner settings. I've maxed out the power limit slider. I've left the temperature limit slider as is at 84 degrees C because, as you're about to see, this card's getting quite warm. I also did not do any sort of overclocking whatsoever because the temperatures that we're getting right now under load are spiking up to 83, 84 degrees C. This is just with the fan speed running at auto. Cranking it up to 100 does cool things down by a few degrees. Not quite as much as I anticipated, and it does also make the system quite noisy as well. But you'll also notice that the GPU load utilization right here is not quite at 100%, like even most of the time, or really any of the time. It seems to just be sort of fluctuating in the all over the place, anywhere from the 50% to the 80% range, occasionally going up to 99%, but because of that, we're also seeing some fluctuations in the core clock frequency. And to be honest, since I started testing this card, I have yet to see it just lock in sort of a sustained frequency. It's just all over the place again. So this is kind of interesting. I did do the benchmarks already, as I mentioned, and the results, the actual performance seems to be okay. It seems thereabouts within the range of what you'd expect from a GTX 1080 Ti. But just to verify, to see if we're really missing out on any performance, and if so, how much, I'm also going to be testing. I've decided I'm going to pop in the 1080 Ti Founders Edition and run the same benchmarks just to compare performance between the two. All right, so our Zotac mini card is taking a breather while we test out the 1080 Ti Founders Edition, which is running right here. We've got Unigine Heaven 4.0 loaded up. And you can see here temperatures are about the same. Well, first off, we're not overclocking, we're just maxing out the power slider. Temperature slider is the same as it was with the Zotac card at 85 degrees C and auto fan curve and all that. So same temperatures, more or less, 85, 84. The fact that the Zotac card is pretty much as hot as the Founders Edition card isn't the greatest. It's not something that I would personally advertise. And then also we've got that same sort of fluctuating frequency. The core clock frequency is all over the place once again. However, when you take a look at GPU load with our Founders Edition card, you'll notice that we are now more consistently hitting anywhere from 98 to 100% utilization. So the question here is, even though the temperatures and the frequency seem to be a little bit dodgy with both cards, our Zotac card's load utilization is all over the place, whereas the Founders Edition seems to be at a more constant 100% usage. So does that make a difference when it comes to gaming benchmarks? We've already run the tests on the Zotac card, so I'm just gonna run those same tests on our Founders Edition here and throw up all of that data onto some graphs for us so we can compare the performance between either of these cards to see if that GPU load utilization fluctuating so drastically on our Zotac card is going to affect its performance in any way. Oh, and by the way, the Ryzen 7 1700, for those of you who are curious, is running at stock frequencies. I have not overclocked it at all for this test. And then we've also got the memory running at 2933, which is the highest I could actually get it to stabilize and boot properly. So on that note, here are the benchmarks. All right, so there you guys have it. Just to summarize some of the results that we were seeing, pretty comparable performance between both cards, which is kind of interesting since this the Zotac mini card here is actually coming out of the box factory overclocked with about, I'd say, a 38 megahertz boost over the Founders Edition, and yet we were seeing pretty much on par performance. There were several instances, however, where the Mini was outperforming the 1080 Ti Founders Edition, albeit by a small margin, probably anywhere from between 1 and 5% at the very most. We were seeing the Mini perform a little bit better. But for the most part, very similar cards actually, even though they look drastically different, just in terms of the performance that they're both delivering. Again, both of these cards were tested at stock. I didn't want to overclock either of them, particularly because of the temperatures we were already hitting, which is another similarity between both cards, 84 to 85 degrees Celsius. Of course, that's where our temperature slider in Afterburner was also set at. And I feel like if this cooler was able to keep that GP102 GPU just a little bit cooler, or maybe significantly cooler, we'd probably see the performance pull even further ahead of the Founders Edition, just because we'd have a little bit more thermal headroom and GPU boost would kick in a little bit more extra performance and speed up the frequency a tad. But that's unfortunately what we were seeing today. Not to say that this is a bad card by any means, but really most people who are buying an add-in board card with a non-blower style cooler on it is probably going to expect better temperatures than what you're getting with the Mini here. So that's something to be aware of. If you were hoping for really cool temperatures in a Mini form factor, that is not going to be the case. Now, because the GPU is getting so warm, the fans have to spin up a little bit faster, and that makes the card a little noisier. In fact, we were pretty much getting around the same noise levels with the Founders Edition on our Mini here. If anything, it was actually a little bit louder, to be honest, but not enough to the point where you could even tell a difference unless you did a straight up A/B comparison, which you guys can take a listen of right now. At the end of the day, I gotta appreciate the fact that Zotac has somehow managed to cram a GP102 into a card that's significantly smaller than the Founders Edition equivalent. At the same time, I do wish that the card was a little bit quieter and a lot cooler, and I also wish that it performed a little bit better than the Founders Edition. But that being said, if you guys are in the market for as much power in as little space as possible, well, you don't really have many other options at this point. So go ahead and check it out in the description below if you're at all interested. Thanks Zotac for providing the sample, and thank you guys for watching this video. Be sure to also toss a like on it if you enjoyed it. And before you go, feel free to check out Bitwit Ultra, my ad-free early access channel, for $1.50 a month. The first 2 weeks are completely free and you can back out any friggin' time. As always, I'm Kyle with Bitwit. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more tech stuff if you haven't already, and I'll see y'all in the next video.